Will, Simon, I want to thank you guys both for being here today and just give everybody a little bit of a sense of how you two came together, because it's a little bit of an unexpected combination. Maybe you can start out talking about this, Will, because I heard there was a little bit of stalking taking place.
I mean, one person's stalking is another person's pursuit. I like to say that I pursued Simon. So he was in my restaurant, 11 Madison Park, for dinner, and I found out the next day, and I'd been a big fan of his. And listen, sometimes you need to manifest things in life. One of those things can be friendships. And so I emailed Simon and through some constant, gentle pressure, convinced him to be my friend. Simon, is that how you remember it?
I mean, yeah, sure, yes. I mean,
that sounds a little polite.
Yeah, I remember that we met for breakfast, and the ask came pretty quickly. Will asked me to speak at his welcome conference, and I sort of said, sure, maybe we'll see if it works out. Sort of politely brushed it off, and then I was in a different restaurant of his in Aspen. I wasn't even on the reservation, but somehow he found out, and the meal was comped. And they said, Will Guidara has picked up the meal. And I turned to my sister. I said, well, I guess I'm speaking at the welcome conference. And and that's really when the friendship took off.
Okay, so the reason that you wanted to get to know him, Will, was what? You had followed him, and what was it about what he was talking about that really captured your attention?
I mean, in my career, I've been in the restaurant business, but I really consider myself to be in the hospitality business. And hospitality is a team sport, right? It doesn't matter how hospitable one person is. If they can't lead an entire organization to feel as passionately and as convicted about their ideas, then they're not going to get anywhere. And through Simon's work, I was just always enamored by how he thought about creating, maintaining, and building cultures. And, I think in life, when you find someone that you're inspired by who seems to be really like-minded, those are the people you want to get closer to, because that's the only way you can grow.
Let's talk a little bit about the book itself, because the title is a great one, and it explains what you two have been working on for so long, just the idea of unreasonable hospitality. It sounds like, okay, sure, it's unreasonable, but give us a few examples, because these examples really are beyond the pale. Why don't you start off, Will, and then you could tell us a little bit too, Simon, just what this idea really entails.
I mean, the idea is that anyone who's achieved any level of success has done so by being unreasonable in their pursuit of the thing that they're doing, the product that they're creating. And the book is about trying to convince people to be just as unreasonable about how they make people feel. At 11 Madison Park, we became the #1 restaurant, not because our food was amazing or our service was technically perfect, but because we did things that went far above and beyond for our guests. I'll give you a couple examples. One night, we saw a family of 4 from Spain. The kids were looking at our massive windows with wonder because it had started snowing, and it was their first time seeing snow. So we found a store that was somehow still open at 8 o'clock on a Friday night selling sleds, and when they left the restaurant, they were greeted by a chauffeur-driven SUV to take them to Central Park to go sledding. Or one night, there was a couple that was at the restaurant because their beach vacation flight had been canceled, and so they were there to console themselves, and our private dining room was empty. And so at the end of their night, we brought them up to the private dining room, which we had transformed into their very own private beach, complete with sand on the ground and a kiddie pool filled with water they could dip their feet into as they drowned their sorrows over tropical Mai Tais.
I mean, that is above and beyond. Sand loaded in. I mean, these are I started reading through the book, and it's just a higher standard. And I guess, Simon, how do you take that and then expand on it? How do you make teams really think this way? Because it seems to me you've got to have a certain type of someone who can understand this, and then to build that on a larger scale is really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the examples that Will shared are big examples. There's extreme examples. What I found absolutely compelling about Will's work, as I got to know him, he has ideas about how to treat people that are universally applicable. If any organization has a customer or a client, there are lessons in Unreasonable Hospitality that can absolutely be applied. And it fundamentally all boils down to listening. What Will does and what he trained his team to do was be totally present and listen for opportunities where you can surprise and delight someone with something unexpected. And what Will loves to say is one size fits one, that when you're given something, you know it was for you. It's not some generic thing that we give to everybody. This was made for you. And sometimes the gestures are quite small, but because they're special, you remember them for the rest of your life. And I think it's these lessons that I knew. It's the reason why I wanted to publish Will's book, is because I wanted as many people as possible to learn the lessons that he had learned in the hospitality industry.
Did you know immediately you wanted to write a book with him? How long did it take, Simon?
I mean, as we got to know each other, I found myself applying Will's lessons to my business. And I found myself telling other organizations outside of hospitality about lessons that I had learned from Will. And so it evolved. I realized there was a there, and then approached Will and said, you know, I think you should write this down, and I would love to be your publisher.
Yeah, Simon, one of the things that really jumped out at me was a section where you talk about real estate. I think you have a friend who's a realtor, and just the idea of not just leaving a gift, but leaving something very specialized. Like you said, it doesn't have to be huge, but it has to show that you're paying attention and that you hear the customer, that you see the customer.
Yeah, I'll tell that one real quick, because I actually just moved into a new apartment yesterday, so this is fresh in my mind. I mean, we did this all the time in a restaurant over a 3-hour experience. But you think about a real estate agent, every time I bought or rented a new apartment, at best, they left me a bottle of sparkling wine in the fridge as my thank you gift. But you think about it, this is someone with whom you've spent weeks, if not months, looking together for your new home. If they've been paying attention, they should know almost every intimate detail about your life. And so imagine instead if the first time my wife and I looked at an apartment, the one we ended up choosing, the real estate agent overheard her talking about the nook that she could see herself doing yoga in every morning. And imagine if when we moved in, rather than the obligatory bottle of bubbles, in that nook was a brand new yoga mat and a note that said, "Welcome to your new home." I mean, like, A, it's not that much more expensive than a bottle of sparkling wine. And B, compared to the average commission, it's an insignificant investment in what will inevitably become a lifelong relationship.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, these are hospitality-like sort of industries. How far does it extend beyond that? What other industries do you see this kind of branching out to, Simon?
I mean, like I said, it's anyone that has any kind of contact with another human being. Or if you work with another human being. Again, this is about paying attention. You know, for example, again, I've learned these things from Will, where somebody randomly, offhandedly sort of mentions their own birthday, you know, even though it's months before the actual birthday. And I'll find myself jotting it down and putting it in my calendar. So when it is their birthday, I pick up the phone and call them and wish them happy birthday, which they didn't even know that I knew when their birthday was. It's paying attention to those little details. Or, for example, somebody will say what their favorite candy is. Oh my God, I love those. And I'll find myself jotting those things down. I don't know what to do with that information, but if it ever comes up, I have these little details that I've been paying attention to. And I learned all of these things from Will. We can do these things as much for our own team members and our own friends as we can for our customers and our clients. So it literally, the thing that I love about Unreasonable Hospitality is we are social animals. We have no choice but to interact with other human beings over the course of a life. So why not spend the energy to make them feel good? The amazing thing is when we do that, it actually makes us feel good. And so the gift, you start to wonder, is like, am I doing it for the person, or does it actually end up being incredibly fulfilling for the giver themselves?
I want to live in both of your worlds. I mean, it's a good place. Just a quick pro tip. I mean, you talk about, Simon, how you're jotting these notes down. Are you literally jotting it down in a notebook? Are you writing it in the notes section of your iPhone? Like, where do you actually do this? How do you keep track of it all?
I mean, you know, it's opportunistic. So sometimes it's on the corner of a napkin that I'll then take the napkin away. But eventually these notes will make their way into my phone, into people in the contact list, you know, in their addresses. I put all the birthdays in as I learn them. I put little notes about people. I have notes all about Will that he doesn't know that I have. You know, and
don't share those here. Do not share those
here. He doesn't know you know. Tell me one thing right now. Come on, surprise us.
No, because then but then I can never use it.
Well, he'll feel good.
Fine,
You're telling him in front of an audience.
I know that Will absolutely, Will doesn't even know that I know this. I know that Will absolutely loves Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
Well,
Yeah.
guys, I really do absolutely love Reese's
It's like a
Peanut
magic trick. That's awesome.
Here's the thing, you know, like, okay, America is a service economy. More than 3/4 of our GDP are service industries. And like when you look at those industries, whether it's financial services, computer services, healthcare, insurance, real estate, retail, everyone that does any of those things does the same thing for a living that I do. We're all in the business of serving other people. And the thesis of the book and everything that Simon and I have been talking about as we worked on it is that when you make the decision to place hospitality at the center of every conversation, it's like taking the entire thing, you know, the scene in The Wizard of Oz where it goes Technicolor.
Yeah.
That's what it does for you, the people you work with, and everyone you serve. It is the very definition of one decision that increases your bottom line, makes the people you're serving happier, and makes the people that you work with so much more fulfilled with the work.
It's funny because I was thinking Charlie and the Chocolate Factory where everything seems really magical. I mean, that's the kind of picture that you guys are painting. But let's bring this back to a dose of reality and what we're dealing with today. The pandemic was really, really hard. People have been dealing with a lot at home. They're trying to get through in a lot of different ways. We're coming back out of that. But as far as I can tell, almost every transaction that I deal with in the real world, people seem to have much shorter tempers these days. Shorter fuses, and they're more frustrated. How do you deliver in that environment?
Well, so let's take a step back. One of the things that I found magical when the pandemic first showed up, when we first went into lockdown, was the number of leaders who leaned on their own humanity to react to the pandemic. In other words, they picked up the telephone and one by one, they called each of their team members and said, "Are you okay?" And it doesn't matter whether they were effective or ineffective leaders prior to lockdown. They all knew how to be a human being, and they all knew that it was important to make people feel like someone cared about them. And I think one of the fascinating things about now, as you said, is now that we're all so short-tempered and we're all still dealing with the trauma of COVID, it's a real thing, we now sort of have this expectation that other people should be looking after us. What I've learned is that the way to solve our own problems is actually to help other people solve the same problem. So if you're looking for love, for example, help somebody else find love. If you're frustrated with your job, help somebody else who's frustrated with your job. In other words, if you're feeling like the world is against you, just try and be a little nicer. You know, say hi to the barista, ask them how they're doing and actually care about the answer. And the amazing thing is hospitality, service, is actually the best way to find calm and peace in ourselves.
Yes, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. But now do the airline industry, because I have not had a fun airline ride in a long time.
I mean, you know, it's so interesting. And I just want to dovetail just for a moment on that last question, because I actually think that the current climate is not a reason why this can't work. It's a reason why this is the exact thing we should all be leaning into. I would always tell the people in my restaurant, when someone came in, a guest, and they were being a little rude, we have a tendency to lean away from tension in moments like that, to say that person is a jerk, they are not worth my energy. When the reality is that the reason they're being rude, it might be the reason why they deserve more love than anyone else in the room. Sometimes the best way to get people to turn a corner is to lead with kindness, because until you know what it's like to receive hospitality, it's very, very challenging to understand how to give it. I mean, it's not, that wasn't a total non sequitur, because when you look at the airlines, I just see people like getting on planes with such anxiety that they treat the people that work on airplanes like not really well, and people kind of give what they get. I think that you look back at what air travel was. My mom was a flight attendant in like the glory days of air travel, and she wore that title with such pride. But I think it starts at the top. Like right now, the focus at most airlines is completely on efficiency. They don't celebrate or prioritize or affirm those moments of graciousness. And my gosh, like, put me and Simon, like some airline, bring us on board for 1 month and let's see what we can do together, because I really do believe it's long past time.
Well, amen. You've got my vote on that. Just to end on one more fun story, tell me, each of you, maybe one more anecdote, either from the book or from some other time, where somebody has gone above and beyond, where you have done it or someone else you've been working with. Just another display of unreasonable hospitality, because I can't get enough of these stories.
Go ahead, Will.
So I'll tell you about 2 gifts that I've given to my wife and how she reacted to each. One time, we were only together for a year, and I was trying to, get her to completely fall in love with me, not dissimilar to my pursuit of Simon. And so I did what most men do on their 1-year anniversary. I went to Cartier, and I bought her a necklace, and it was the first time I'd ever bought a Cartier necklace for a woman. And she looked at it, and she liked it, and she pretended to love it, and I think she's worn it once in the years since. Another gift, which was significantly less expensive than that. New York Times Magazine did this new game. It was called Boxing Match. It was like a blend between the crossword puzzles and like Sudoku. And my wife is a workaholic, and when that game came out in New York Times Magazine, every Sunday she fell in love with it. It was this 1 hour a week where she completely slowed down. And then 2 months later, I guess it wasn't that popular. They stopped making it. And she was devastated. I emailed everyone I could at the New York Times until finally I found the person that had made that game. And I hired them to make another 50 of them, and I printed them up in a little book, and I gave her her own book of boxing match games. And it cost a fraction of the necklace, and the impact was dramatically more. And the reason why, so many different men had bought their partners that exact same Cartier necklace.
Yeah.
That boxing match book would not have made sense to give to another human being on the planet. She felt seen, she felt loved, and she felt known.
That is an excellent story, and you are a true romantic. I love that. All right, Simon, got one?
I mean, mine is very similar, except it was done for me. It was an ex-girlfriend for my birthday, where she planned a scavenger hunt, but it was just in my apartment in New York City, where she basically gave me my first clue in an envelope. I thought it was just a birthday card, and it was just a clue, and I had to go through the apartment and find more clues to get to the present. And to be honest with you, I don't even remember what the present was, and I don't even know when she planned this. And it must have taken her forever. And in both my example and Will's, and by the way, I still have those clues. I still have that whole pile of cards to this day. I mean, it was like 15 years ago, and I'm not that sentimental, I have to admit, and yet I keep these cards because somebody gave so much time and energy. And I think that's the thing that distinguishes hospitality from all these other things, which is, money is a redeemable commodity. We can spend money and we can make it back. So even if we waste it, we can get it back. But time and energy are non-redeemable commodities. And when someone gives us time, when someone gives us energy, the feeling of that gift is absolutely overwhelming. And so to underscore what Will has said, and even in the restaurant, even though some of the examples he shared might have cost some money, they don't have to cost anything. They just have to cost time and attention and that listening, that being present for someone. That's the greatest gift we can give someone, and that's what unreasonable hospitality is all about.